We do have a ton to get through in this episode.
Common sense is finally prevailing.
There was controversy this month, Dave.
I'm not particularly excited by that.
Secrets and things on set.
I haven't told them anything.
I think this is just good times all round.
Every Doctor Who is liked by somebody, and that's a really good thing.
Davo, my doctor.
I know we disagree on this one.
First world problems, Dave.
I get why fans are asking those questions.
Oh gosh, that's actually quite a lot to talk about.
It doesn't compute.
It's the elephant in the room.
That's okay.
Fandom versus the BBC.
The cardinal sin.
Moving along.
Lunch. Hello and welcome to the Doctor Who show for April 2025. I'm Dave.
And I'm Rob.
And our topic this month is going to be Father Time by Lance Parkin. We'll also have a quick summary of the news, our usual short topics, lots of listener feedback, all the usual things. But yes, today we are looking at an 8th Doctor novel, the first time we've done this. Rob, how are you?
Yeah, very good, Dave. Good to be here. It's been a strange month. We should acknowledge that. You're obviously knee-deep in things relating to the election. We're getting to the pointy end of that now. Andor's back on TV, which we've been salivating for a long, long time. Doctor Who's on, we're doing hot takes. It's definitely one of the busier months we'll face this year. But here we are. We still haven't missed dropping a monthly episode in the history of the podcast, and we're here in our 9th year. Still no Patreon. So hello, everyone. Hello, Dave. I love doing this podcast.
Yes, look, it is definitely a lot of fun. It has been really quite enjoyable as I've been sort of doing 12, 13, 14, 15-hour days on the campaign to know that just every now and then I can take half an hour off and read a bit of a Doctor Who book and sort of enjoy it. It just wasn't possible for me to find time to prepare and record last month. So thank you to Mike Solko for stepping into the chair. He's a natural. It was really fun to listen to.
He is.
And I've got to say, it was interesting because although I've looked a bit at the alternate Season 23 or the original plan for Season 23, Nightmare Fair, Mission of Magnus, all those sort of ones, I've never really looked at the unmade stories from Trial. Mm-hmm. So that was actually very interesting. So I enjoyed being a listener for that one. But yes, look, I'm tuning off all talk of key seats and how to vote cards and social media buys and all of that. And I'm just focused on Doctor Who. So thank you for being my sanity break, Rob.
My pleasure, Dave. My pleasure.
So look, for the news this month, Rob, we decided we weren't going to do a whole bunch of news stories because the news at the moment is very, very straightforward. Doctor Who is screening.
Yeah, it is.
Doctor Who is out there, Rob. So the news is it's on the screens. Listeners can watch it.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, there's ratings news coming in, which people are talking about. The usual Muppets on YouTube are saying, oh, look, episodes are only getting 2 million views. What they're not saying is that a lot of people are watching it on iPlayer almost 12 hours earlier in the UK, so you can pretty much probably double those views when we get to the consolidated. So there's a bit of fighting already going on about ratings. Outside of that, though, I think probably the biggest news is a couple of weeks ago, Jean Marsh passed away. Yeah,
I did see that Jean Marsh passed away. That was quite sad. And it's interesting. She is somebody who feels very involved with Doctor Who, even though she was only in a few stories. Yes, she was a companion, and she was killed in a fantastic adventure. She was fantastic in The Crusade. She was brilliant in Battlefield, but she did a lot of work outside of that, writing and producing as well as acting. I think, though, the thing that I will most remember her for is as Mombi in Return to Oz, where she was bloody terrifying.
Yeah.
How was that made for kids? We were different. We were different back in the 80s, weren't we, Rob?
We were. There are lists on the internet of all the different ways we were different. We used to drink from hoses out the front of people's houses, Dave.
Yeah, and kids' TV was just terrifying. And Jean Marsh was a big part of that. So that was sad. Yes, look, the ratings wars are happening because it wouldn't be Doctor Who fandom without that. Yes, 2 million for the first episode is down on last time's, but is that an evolution of people moving further and further to iPlayer? Is it just naturally not going to be as big as Ncuti Gatwa's first ever episode? Yeah, probably. It's a bit sad that it's very hard now to get any information about ratings without a commentary attached, like, and here's all the reasons this is awesome, or here's all the reasons this is terrible. Doctor Who seems to be very, very competitive in its slot compared to the shows around it. And at the end of the day, we know that there's going to be a gap between Season 2 and Season 3 of RTD2 Who. We don't yet know if Ncuti will be back for Season 3. There's a lot up in the air, and it's not going to be decided by ratings.
No, that's for sure. And I would say, even when we get to the consolidateds, they won't be skyrocketing to the moon. But it's just the way the pure overnights have been weaponized in recent years without these people explaining the full story that actually loads of fans go and watch it on streaming first. It just grinds my gears, Dave. That's all I'll say about that.
Yeah, and as we've discussed before, Disney won't be looking at the BBC ratings. They couldn't care about the BBC ratings.
No.
They'll be looking at their own downloads. They're going to be looking at who buys a Disney subscription just to watch Doctor Who. And the cream for Disney is people who get a subscription for a month to watch Doctor Who, then see all the other stuff they want to say and say, oh, I might go catch up on those Star Wars stories I haven't seen. I might go watch this as well. And suddenly they're buying 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, or maybe an annual subscription. That's what Disney really wants out of this. But as we've said before as well, Disney aren't looking at the overnights for Doctor Who. They're looking for how the entire series goes. Do people stick with it? Do they come back and forth? Do they rush to watch it? And do they catch up with it over weeks to come? So Disney won't be making a decision about their numbers for probably at least 3 months from now. So let's not worry about things we can't see, control, or understand.
Well said.
On to short topics, and I will kick us off, Rob, because since we last recorded together, I went to another Sirens of Audio event. This was in Melbourne with Matthew Waterhouse, Doctor Who's Adric.
Wow.
And I've got to say, it was perhaps the best of these that I have been to.
Wow, that's a big call.
It is a big call because they've all been a lot of fun, but Matthew Waterhouse, and a few other people agreed with me on this, was probably the most interesting guest that they have had. The others have all been really good. The format of the events, where you basically get an entire day with the guest. It starts off in the first segment with Phil from Science of Audio doing a formalised interview with them, working through their time on Doctor Who. Then you get a long period for proper Q&A. They usually do a live commentary of an episode. So you really get a sense that you're actually seeing these guests. That means that they're telling stories beyond just the sort of the scripted 45 minutes they do at big conventions where they're sort of on at 10 past the hour, off by 10 to the hour, and they just sort of get out there, do their 45-minute shtick and get off. There's a real sense of getting to know them, and because these are smaller, more intimate audiences, and we're, the other side of the planet to where they live, I think the guests feel they can be a lot more honest about things, because, Janet Fielding isn't in the room with them, so they can say what they think. And Matthew Waterhouse, I think, was definitely an extreme example of that. He was properly considerate and thoughtful in his answers. And you could see when somebody asked him a question, he didn't just do as some guests do, and totally understandably, but he didn't just sort of go, I could do anecdote 43 in response to that, so I'll do that one. He was actually going, that's an interesting question. Here's sort of what I think, and thinking about it some more, here's what else I think, and that was really, really interesting. It was interesting to hear him talk about his relationships with different actors and companions. He spoke with a lot of depth about his relationship with Tom Baker and the difference that Lala leaving the show made to that relationship, because I think we all know that Lala and Tom on set together was difficult for everybody around them, and particularly so for Waterhouse, who was 18 at the time that he was doing all this.
Yeah.
But then he really did feel, and I've talked about this coming across on screen, that mentor relationship between the Fourth Doctor and Adric really being one of my favourite, most wonderful Doctor-companion relationships. And Matthew really spoke about that and how much he enjoyed that and how good he thought that was. There were a couple of times when questions, including from myself, sort of pushed him and then talk about the Peter Davison Fifth Doctor relationship with Matthew and Adric. And it was interesting that he was a lot more careful and unwilling to be quite as honest about that one. I think there's a bit more of a dynamic going on there between those two that he wasn't willing to go into quite as much. He was very open about Janet Fielding, and Janet is Janet. Janet's a very combative sort of person, and how he dealt with that back when he was 18 and how he deals with that now that he's 50-something or maybe even 60-something. That was really good. He talked about working with Anthony Ainley. He talked about working with Peter Grimwade, who I think is, a top 3 director of Classic Who, but Matthew really just said was terrible at working with actors and didn't feel got the best performances from him.
Wow.
Yeah, there were, all the stories that you expect. He talked about, what it was like being written off and killed and all the rest of that. He talked about Big Finish and what he did enjoy doing, what he didn't enjoy doing, but, how he sort of come to Big Finish. It was a really nice event. As always, it's good to see my friends in local Melbourne fandom. It was lovely to have people who listen to the podcast come and say, you're Dave from the Doctor Who show. I really enjoyed the podcast, to the point that one chap, John, came up to Richard and I and said, I had some leftover bottles of gin from a present that my wife got me. Here's a bottle of gin for your next Gin and TARDIS.
Wow. That's incredible.
So, and I'm rarely speechless, but on that occasion, it's just like somebody I've never met before says, I enjoy your podcast so much that I'm giving you a bottle of gin to support your next episode. So I just thought, wow, that was really touching. Good to see the usual crowd. The other thing I should mention, Rob, is we had a surprise guest at the end. Mm-hmm. Pete McTighe dropped by.
Oh, very nice.
He was apparently in Melbourne for the weekend, so he was able to drop by. He was not able to talk about the episode he's written for the coming season for very obvious reasons, but he did have a bit of a chat about writing for the show, his history with the show, how he got into writing his first episode and sort of the way that happened. I did ask Pete the question. I said, do you agree, now that you've written for 2 different Doctors with Terrance Dicks, that you just write the Doctor and let the actor then put their character over the top? And he said, well, I would never disagree with Terrance Dicks. And did say that sort of more or less, particularly as he didn't really know where Jodie's Doctor was going and where Ncuti's Doctor is going, he did default to, in a large extent, the Doctor, and then allowed the actors to really put that personality over the top. So that was interesting, and I got to speak to Pete later and introduce myself because we have a mutual friend, Simon, in Sydney, so cool. I introduced myself there. So, yeah, look, just another fun event, Rob.
That's really good to hear, Dave. I love hearing about these events.
And for those who are interested, we have 2 announcements from the Sirens of Audio. They have in October, Rob, and I'm so looking forward to this one. Mm-hmm. Carol Ann Ford is coming.
Wow.
The last link with that first season of Doctor Who.
Yeah, it is.
Well, apart from, I guess, Warris Hussein, who said he would never travel to Australia because he is now older.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to Carol Ann Ford out in October. And Sally Novette from Blake 7 is coming out in November. So I've booked my tickets already for those. If you are interested, listeners, and you are in Australia, just check out the Sirens of Audio website. Go to their live events page. These are events that are large enough to not be embarrassing, but small enough that they are intimate. The guests are open, honest. The fans are friendly. If you have any doubts about coming along, I strongly encourage it.
These next 2 sound like they're made just for you, Dave.
I could not be happy with it. A short topic from you, Rob.
Yeah, something I spoke about on X a little while back, if listeners saw it, is I think we're in a sort of strange place with Doctor Who at the moment, Dave. For the longest time, there have been issues on the set, or we've been told about issues on the set, and that's why Millie was dropped to an occasional appearance this season after being in just one 8-episode season. And we've been told Ncuti hasn't been overly happy with this and that, and so he's bailed, and there's no way Disney will renew the series, people say. All of that stuff. And I mean, we were touching on that earlier regarding the ratings. I won't go back down that rabbit hole. And I think, Dave, it's creating a situation where a certain kind of fan is freaking out, either consciously or subconsciously perhaps, and in turn being incredibly defensive about the series, maybe more defensive than usual. And I'm seeing that in the way some people have responded to our hot takes. You and I haven't discussed this, so you're hearing this live along with the listeners. I mean, in the past, we'd say, hey, this bit of the show was good and this bit was bad, and we laughed at that bit. Maybe it wasn't meant to be laughed at. I don't know. And overall, it was fine. And people would come back to us and say, good work. You guys always strike a nice balance between either extreme. You're sort of in the middle. That's nice. And don't get me wrong, among the tons and tons and tons of feedback we've had already this season across all the platforms, that vibe is still there with a lot of people. But I sense a growing number of people who are coming back at us like, oh, so you hated it. And I have to stop and think, well, what? We've given a particular story a decent score, we've highlighted things we like, we've suggested it's quite alright, and then you realise, but we also said we didn't like X or Y bit or whatever, and that's somehow some people's only takeaway from the review. And I can't think of any other reason that people are suddenly focused on just the negatives, again, consciously or subconsciously, I don't know, aside from being worried about the show's future and getting antsy if anyone, in quotation marks, dares to say, hey, this episode wasn't as good as it could have been. I might stop there for the moment and give you a chance to talk, Dave. I feel like I've been talking forever.
Yeah, I think that's probably right, Rob. I don't think I've noticed it being quite as pronounced as you perhaps have seen.
But I run the channels.
But you run the channel, so that's definitely true. And I think the other side of it also is this sense, and I've spoken about it a little bit before, and I had a long chat about it on the 42 to Doomsday Christmas episode when I guested on there at the end of the last year. This sort of sense that any television show that lasts for 60-something years, and even the new series, which is now at its 20th anniversary, is going to evolve to survive. And at some point, it moves a very long way from the conception, and it therefore moves a very long way from the style and tone of the show when each member of the audience became a fan. That is a very natural thing to do, but it also means as it moves further away, as it evolves, as it changes, it may drift away from what individual fans like. And I think we have seen a acceleration in people of our generation who I felt the show has now moved a bit beyond what they are interested in. Some people have taken that with good grace. Some people have felt a real sort of pain at that, almost a sort of a breakup type pain at that.
Yeah.
And now think of the show very negatively, or at least the new version of the show very negatively. So it's also mixed out there. You know, I understand that. There are moments when I look at the new show and it does feel as though it's moved a little bit too far from me, and then we get a good episode that brings me back. We did sort of go into that in a bit of depth on our first hot take, which perhaps was a little indulgent, but I think necessary as we sort of frame the first season. I sort of feel, having said that now, I'm ready to just take each episode as it comes. Yeah, I just think there's a lot of stuff going on. And at the end of the day, being a fan is fundamentally an emotional investment. Yeah. And emotion is not rational. Emotion is not sensible. All those cliches. People do get angry, resentful, jealous, envious. All of that. I think we're seeing that in fandom. There's probably other pockets of fandom that we just don't see, which is people who have discovered this show as a 13-year-old for the first time and think this is bloody awesome, and we'll stick with this iteration for a long time, and maybe go back to even something like Eccleston or Tennant and go, this is a bit old. Yep. Not too sure about this. This isn't what I like. I just like this new stuff. So we're probably not seeing that because they're not so much our circles. So yeah, there's a lot of emotion out there. I think that the new series has brought that out. And look, we turn on the mic and say what we think. And we're really grateful a lot of people listen.
Yeah. I'd just finish by saying the great beauty of a podcast is you can replay it. And I'd encourage anyone who thinks we hate the show or are very negative about it to just go and replay an episode and actually really listen this time. Because I don't believe we've ever slated any episode, even in a hot take.
Yeah, Devil's Court, I came close.
You came close.
I came close.
But still didn't slate it completely.
No, look, you and I have always had a deal that if we get to the point where we're just actually not enjoying watching the show, we're not going to do hot takes, because
exactly,
it wouldn't be fun for you, it wouldn't be fun for me, it wouldn't be fun for the listener. So if we do reach the point, either of us, where we just say, you know what, this isn't for me anymore, no foul, no harm, I'm out, we will do that. But until that time, we will try and make the best of it. My final short topic, Rob.
Yes.
I said on the run sheet it was going to be watching Earthshock. I then went to make my notes and thought, I don't have a lot to actually say, other than I put on Earthshock last week as, again, just a bit of escapist television, sort of watched an episode every night or so. I think partly because I'd just seen Matthew Waterhouse, partly because Pull to Open did a episode on Earthshock, so it was in my mind. And I just really, really enjoyed it. That first episode particularly is just gold quality. It is champagne first episode Doctor Who. The build-up and everything. And even when I've seen it many times before, I know that it's going to end with the big reveal of the Cybermen and destroy them at once. You know, I know what's coming, and I still just get a real tingle of, wow, this is great. Davo is very good in it. Waterhouse gives, I think, his best performance of season 19. I think he has better ones in season 18, particularly Traken and Logopolis, but it's Waterhouse's best performance, I think, of season 19. He actually gets written really well. I think, although the actors didn't like Peter Grimwade, his direction is fantastic. I think it is the best use of that costume of the Cybermen. Grimwade really knows how to direct them, and they just are terrifying and menacing. I don't have anything new or insightful to say other than I put on a story I know is a classic, and my God, was it a classic. It was just fun to watch that one episode a night over the course of about a week.
Yeah, well said. I have nothing to add. I love Davo. I love the Davo era. I love Cybermen. Where am I going to land on the equation with Earthshock? You know, of course, I bloody love it. Yeah.
No, I do enjoy just sometimes just pulling out a random story and just going, this is why I love this show. This is so good.
Brilliant.
We'll now move on to our main topic, Rob, which is the book I have sitting here in front of me, Doctor Who, Father Time, by Lance Parkin.
Yes, and hopefully for those who haven't read this book but are interested, you've listened to our synopsis episode that we dropped a few days back.
Yes, if you do need a refresher or you haven't read the book before about what happens in this book and some context in which to enjoy it, there's a 16, 17-minute synopsis. Please go and have a listen to that. We do spoil the book in that synopsis. We will be spoiling the book in this discussion because it is nearly 25 years old. But I'm just looking at it now, and I'm looking at the cover. I have no idea what that is on the cover. It's still bizarre. I hate all the Eighth Doctor book covers. It's early computer generation. I miss the art covers of the New Adventures of the Target novels.
Yeah.
But you look at the blurb, Rob,
yes,
and the very opening quote, "I love her," the Doctor said. "Of course you do. She's your daughter."
Yeah.
That's a very intriguing start, Rob. So let's talk about our first experiences with this book, what we knew about it going in, and maybe, Rob, do you want to start with why you picked this from... And I'll give you this context, listeners. I said to Rob, here's the dozen or so Eighth Doctor novels I actually own a physical copy of. So you pick one of those. And this is the one you picked, Rob.
Yeah, Dave. Look, Lance Parkin. Let's start with Lance. He is a big deal in Doctor Who novels as far as I'm concerned. In the New Adventures, he did Just War and The Dying Days. For the Missing Adventures, he did Cold Fusion. He did a Benny book called Beige Planet Mars with Mark Clapham. In the past Doctor Adventures, he did The Infinity Doctors, which is a pretty legendary book, goes for a lot of money these days. And in the EDAs, he wrote Father Time, today's book, Trading Futures, and the Gallifrey Chronicles. So, like, in the Gallifrey Chronicles and The Dying Days alone, he's wrapping up entire series of novels. Lance Parkin is the dude you give that stuff to. So I was keen to go back to this because, A, it is a Lance Parkin novel, and B, I remembered that it could be a book that could be read as a standalone adventure. But beyond that, it's a little bit odd. It's a little bit different to what you think an Eighth Doctor adventure might be because of the situation he's in, which we'll unravel. And I thought, that could be very interesting to do. That could be interesting for Dave. And of course, you owned a copy, so that sealed the deal, Dave. There it is.
Yeah, and the only reason I own a copy is because We're All Stories in the End, the podcast that's working through the EDAs and NAs in alphabetical order, had recently done Father Time, and that was one of them, like Autumn Mist, where I thought, that's really intriguing. I think I want to read that sometime, and went on eBay and found myself a copy. So it was sitting there waiting to be read sometime, and this prompted me to read it. Now, like you, Rob, I came to this knowing that Lance Parkin was a big deal. I can remember when his first novel landed, which was Just War, which I reread last year, and it still stands up. But that came very late in the New Adventures range, and it was one of those ones where they go, oh, a whole new author, his first new adventure, that's really exciting. And everyone's just gone, this is a bloody brilliant book. This guy can write. Yeah. And then the fact that he was given the very last New Adventure slot, the only one they did as a Paul McGann Eighth Doctor novel, I think just showed how high regard the Virgin Publishing people held him in. Cold Fusion was also the only multi-Doctor story that came out of the Virgin books. I mean, proper multi-Doctor story where the Fifth Doctor met the Seventh Doctor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he was a big deal, and I know he went on to do other stuff. But yes, I came into this not knowing anything about it, not having read it before. I wasn't really engaged in fandom at the time it came out, so I didn't see reviews. I didn't have friends talking about it. And even the Eighth Doctor novels, I don't really know anyone who was in my fan circles at the time who was still reading them at that stage. A lot of us started reading them after they started coming out, but many people dropped off, partly because once a few people in your social group drop off, others find, I'm not talking about it with my mates, so I'm less inclined to rush to read it. In my case, I was, getting into, doing that whole, getting into adulthood and finishing university and getting a job. And also just, as I've said before, having been really invested in the New Adventures, this idea of, right, we're wiping the slate clean and starting from the start, just felt very like, I'm not doing that again. And, I'm not invested in him again because I've seen him in sort of one kind of not great TV movie. And some of those first Eighth Doctor books weren't very good at all. Mm-hmm. But this is about 2/3 of the way through the run. And I guess by now they really knew what they were doing.
Yeah. Whereas the EDAs for me was where I swung back in because I'd ignored the NAs and MAs at the time, gotten a bit older, enjoyed the Eighth Doctor's character in the TV movie and thought, oh my God, now there's a range of novels? And I didn't have a fan group around me to discuss them with, but I did have the internet. I had Usenet news groups online where I'd discuss these novels. So this is a very happy part of my life. And Yes, so I first read this a long time ago, almost quarter of a century ago, which is just bloody horrifying, Dave. So this reread was a long time in the making for me, and I'm glad it happened. I'm glad we're doing it today.
Interesting to note as well, Rob, you go in as a bit of a fan of Paul McGann's Doctor, I believe, having read the books, listened to a lot of his Big Finish.
Massively.
Whereas I don't know the Eighth Doctor very well at all. I've obviously seen the telly movie. I saw his little mini-sode. What was it? Night of the Doctor.
Yeah.
I've read some of the EDAs, but not a lot, and not very recently. I've listened to a couple of his Big Finishes, but literally I think maybe two. Mm-hmm. So I went in not necessarily knowing the Eighth Doctor all that well.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
So perhaps we'll talk a bit about how we found this. Rob, I'll ask you first. Coming back to Father Time, how did you feel?
Well, like I say, Dave, I was just delighted that I had a chance to come back to it. Because there's so much in Doctor Who that I've consumed over the years that I've never had a chance to go back to. The TV shows are different because they're on disc and you can just grab the disc and watch a show. That's pretty easy.
Yeah, it's 90 minutes. It's over and done within an evening.
Yeah, but actually reading a novel when there are so many other novels and non-fiction books I want to read and am reading, I just don't have the time and haven't gone back to many books, and this is one of them in, as I say, a quarter of a century. So I was very excited to be opening this. Like, I'm being made to open this for the show. Great, I have an excuse to do it.
And how did you feel at the end of it? Did you enjoy it again? Did it live up to expectations?
Yeah. It's funny when you reread something after a long time, you're reminded of all this stuff you've forgotten, both good and bad. Most of it very, very good. There's one particular element that I'll call out later where I'm like, that's a bit clunky. But on the whole, yeah, I thought it's great.
Yeah, I started my read a little bit uncertain about it. There was something in the way that it was written in a very sort of, almost sort of silly, sort of funny sort of way. I wouldn't say Adams-ish, like, it wasn't Douglas Adams-ish, but it was sort of a little bit of sort of tee-hee-hee, look at the weird things that are going on. It wasn't a very conventional narrative style for the first chapter or two, and for the first chapter or two I was sort of thinking, I'm not sure I like the tone here. But
really?
I also found in those first couple of chapters that I was going, I really like this character, this Deborah character, and I want to learn more about her, and I want to see where this adventure takes her. So that did keep me going. And then I just found it became a much more conventional style. I don't know whether that was a deliberate thing or Lance Parker just sort of couldn't keep that up. I don't know. But I did find that it was a book where at the end of each chapter I was sort of going, I want to read more. I want to find out what happens next. I was invested in these characters. And there were stronger parts and weaker parts across the three parts that it's divided into. But I did have a really positive experience with it. And I did find I recognised the Eighth Doctor more than I expected, quicker than I expected. It really did feel like the Paul McGann that I know.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting.
We should also mention, I said there that it's in three parts. And as we go on to sort of setting the scene and talking about how this all fits in, it is worth knowing that the three parts are named after cartoons from my childhood. So we have Battle of the Planets, which I was an absolute massive fan of as a kid. That, of course, being the Western adaptation of Gatchaman, I think it is.
Oh, it's got a long title. It's like Ninja Science Team Gatchaman or something like that.
Yeah.
But most people called it G-Force because in the show they were called G-Force. So all my friends just said, are you going to watch G-Force this afternoon?
Yes, that's right. I think I did as well. But yeah, Battle of the Planets, and where they cut out all the really violent Japanese sort of manga stuff and put in 7 Zark 7 to fill in the gap. Which, I loved 7 Zark 7 when I was like 6.
Yeah.
That was cool. Masters of the Universe, which I watched, I was never a massive fan of. And then part 3 was called Defenders of the Earth, and I thought, I haven't heard of that one. And I thought, hang on, some dim, dark bell is ringing in my brain. And then I looked up on YouTube, and suddenly, not only did I remember it, but all the lyrics to the opening theme just unlocked and came back into my mind. I reckon that might have had only one run out here when I was a kid. That wasn't something like G-Force, which is sort of, got a few runs out here. But I did remember watching that, so that was fun. But Rob, talk a bit more about setting the scene, because you came to this in an understanding of the context. in a way that I was aware of, but I didn't really appreciate.
Yeah. Basically, this comes at the end, or towards the end, of what fans call the Earth arc. And what creates that arc is a novel called The Ancestor Cell, where, spoilers, the Doctor uses the TARDIS to destroy a faction paradox fleet that is threatening Gallifrey, and in the process, Gallifrey is destroyed as well. So we're treading similar territory to the TV series, years before the TV series, at least in terms of Gallifrey has been destroyed.
I knew that happened in the EDAs. I didn't realise it was about halfway through.
Yeah.
Huh.
And then Compassion, who is a human transformed into a TARDIS, because the EDAs are pretty wild, folks. She takes the Doctor and what's left of his TARDIS to Earth in the 1800s. The idea being that he'll live through the next century on Earth as a normal dude with a dodgy memory, while the TARDIS literally rebuilds itself because it's organic. And the books in that arc, if people are curious, are The Burning, which is where it starts in the Victorian era, Casualties of War, which is World War I, The Turing Test, which is World War II, as people might guess from Alan Turing being in the title there, Endgame, which is the Cold War, this book we're looking at today, which is set across the 1980s, and then Escape Velocity, which is set in the year 2001, which was also the year that novel came out. And as you can guess from the title, that's where he leaves Earth, basically. So it's a nice sort of series of books.
Yeah, there are a few in there that I'm quite curious to read. Maybe I will sort of make a point of maybe even just working through that arc at some point over the next couple of years. I was aware that this arc existed because, again, a number of those books have been discussed on We're All Stories in the End, because they all alphabetically come early in the alphabet. So that was very helpful.
Right. Okay.
So I was sort of aware of that context, and I found it wasn't that hard to kind of understand, because there's a lot of explanation quite quickly and quite early on that the Doctor is amnesiac. He remembers a few things but not everything. He knows the TARDIS is special to him, but he doesn't know what it is. And so I sort of found that context was quite good. And I have some other thoughts about how that plays out in the plot that we will get into.
Look, before we get into the plot, one thing that stands out for me across the whole book is the structure. We have those three parts we were talking about, and then they're divided into chapters. And I find, and please jump in with your own thoughts, Dave, I find the chapters are really quick to read. So it might sound weird, but psychologically, you feel that you're powering through this book anytime you pick it up. If there were half as many chapters, but they were 100% longer, I think this would feel like a real slog to read, despite being exactly the same length. Isn't that weird? Like, this is a novel where you can smash a chapter in no time and feel that you got somewhere. And it might seem lazy that I love books like that, but when I'm in bed, I love that I can finish a whole chapter easily and not have to stick a bookmark halfway through a chapter. Is this just a me thing, Dave? Am I coming across as very weird here?
No, like Lance Parkin does know how to structure a book really, really well. And look, this was a longer one, but also, was it common for the Eighth Doctor Adventures to have such tiny, tiny print, Rob? Is that a thing?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
right, okay. Because I sort of looked and thought, 180 pages, that's about standard for a good new adventure. And then I looked at the print and thought, wow, okay, I'm going to need my glasses and a good reading light for this one. So that was good. But yeah, I thought the chapters worked really well. I also thought the three-part structure worked exceptionally well. There's a lot of books in the Virgin Ranges that throw in parts as well as chapters, I think sometimes without any real sense or need of it. But in this case, there were three very distinct parts, and I was appreciative of that because as I'm getting into part one, I thought, this is all really exciting, I'm really loving it, but how the hell do they get 280 small print pages out of this setup?
Yeah.
And then they did really sort of wrap up part one properly. Some characters didn't make it to part two, and I thought, okay, there really is a very distinct thing here. New characters were introduced in part two, some of whom don't make it to part three. That was really good, but it also meant that there were times when I'm going, oh, it's possible that these guys won't make it to part three. And having known that there's going to be a pretty big death count and some key characters get killed in part one, I thought, well, it's not impossible that Farron or Bob or Deb or whatever don't make it to part three. And in fact, Salak doesn't, which was a big sort of like, oh, wow, okay, that could happen. So I thought he really made use of those really well. And they did feel like three distinct episodes, if you like.
Yeah, I made a note that the body count does stand out in this novel. It's pretty brutal. I mean, from early on in the book where the UFO spotter is just casually executed in the hospital. And you're like, oh man. And that doesn't let up all through the book. We even have Miranda executing a guy when she doesn't even have to. It's not a life or death moment. She just has the guy under control. The police are coming. She still takes him out. The body count isn't insane numbers-wise. You know, it's not a war zone. There aren't tens of thousands of people dying all over the place, but there are lots of regular, very brutal, very weird sometimes deaths in this book.
Yeah, that first one was the one that really made me sit up and sort of go, oh, I was really kind of liking this guy, and I felt actually quite relieved when he was saved by the doctor and Deborah and he was recovering in hospital. I thought, I wonder where this is going to go, and oh, no, they've killed him. Okay, wow. Okay, we're doing... Yeah. It's this sort of book. So, no, that was absolutely the case. A number of the deaths were quite affecting. One wasn't, and I'll get to that when we get to that.
I think one thing that might surprise people is there is a large amount of sexual content in the book, and a lot of it relates to very young people. There's Barry, who's married. He's having an affair with a 17-year-old. And we later get the revelation that he got her pregnant and now the girl is grown up and going to the school. But on a much bigger scale, there's Miranda's pal, Dina, who seems to talk about sex non-stop. And at one point, she even declares, the doctor's good looking and ponders if he's into schoolgirls. The not-so-subtle subtext being that she'd like to shag him. And how does that fly in 2025? Especially when we realise that Dina isn't even 16 there. Because she has her 16th birthday and a pretty gratuitous sex scene to boot later on in the book, Dave.
Yeah, this was one aspect of the book that didn't particularly work for me. I don't know whether it's because it's dated or just didn't sort of work at the time, but I don't think Parkin writes teenage sexuality particularly well or convincingly at all. And I think he perhaps was sort of torn between, I want to show these teenagers are sexually active, but also I'm not going to do graphic sex scenes about two high school kids getting it on. So he sort of falls between those two and doesn't really do anything all that satisfactorily. And even I felt a little bit like Miranda became a bit of a sexual object. And when it sort of goes from everybody wanting to shag her in part 2 to her shagging everyone in part 3, I did sort of go, did I need this? I could see what he's doing. I don't think it came off. And if this was the Virgin New Avengers, I'd go, yeah, okay, it's another Virgin NA that's not doing sex very well. Like, we're trying to be adult and talk about sex, and it's a bunch of young Doctor Who fans who really don't know what they're talking about. The EDAs, I didn't expect that to come out. For some reason, I thought they were a bit cleaner and more... For some reason, I didn't think the EDAs were nearly as sexual as the NA, so I wasn't expecting that. Whether that's a completely wrong assumption or not, I don't know. But I was surprised by it and didn't particularly enjoy it.
Yeah, well, just on Miranda, I'd say in that second part, she's presented as reasonably asexual, almost as the opposite of Dina.
Yes.
And it also ties into what the sort of characterisation of the Doctor is like, because they're really hammering home that this is the Doctor's daughter. She's very much like him. So she's also asexual, because that's what the Doctor was around that sort of period of time, the kiss in the TV movie notwithstanding. But I think you're right. I think someone opening a Doctor Who novel, particularly an EDA, when it's the NAs that everyone thinks, they tried to be edgy in the NAs. But this is an EDA. They might not be expecting this kind of B-plot where it's like, I'm now reading about a schoolgirl riding her best friend's boyfriend, and she's wearing nothing but the necklace the bestie gave her a few hours earlier at her 16th birthday in a Doctor Who novel. What's going on here? Make this end, please. Yeah,
and the part in part 3 where we discover where Miranda is and she's in India, and it sort of goes into a lot of detail about her still in bed with the guy from the night before. And it's interesting, Rob, when you did the synopsis, you put down that was her first time. But I actually removed that when I did my edit because I took it as being, this was just, this is how she finds somewhere to spend the night every night. So I sort of took it as like, well, the way Miranda has survived is by bed hopping.
Right.
I don't know which of us is right. We'll have to go back and read it or perhaps email Lance Parkin and find out. But I sort of thought at that point, particularly having made her a very asexual character who's sort of struggling with what are these Earth feelings that they did in part 2, I just felt that there was no need for her to wake up in bed with someone in part 3. It just felt like the author going, and now my gorgeous girl's got laid, and this is really titillating. And it's like, yeah, no, didn't need that, dude. Didn't need that.
I actually like the Miranda in the second part where she's like noticing everyone around her is having sex or thinking about sex, and so she's almost curious about it from a scientific point of view, like it's an experiment almost.
Yeah, and I did like, and this is when I say that there were some times where they were doing teenage sexuality well, because they couldn't delve in it, they didn't quite pull it off at times. I did like that thing of being a teenager of, well, I guess I need to ask a boy out because this is the point in life where I'm meant to ask a boy out. And yes. I guess I'll kiss him because this is what we're meant to do next, but not really being into it. And then, you come along a little bit later and you kiss someone, you go, oh yeah, I've done this because I wanted to, and this is a whole different experience. And, that was an interesting thing to do. But again, being a Doctor Who novel, being sort of the C plot, and yeah, just like, you're not going to go into real detail about teenagers. Yeah, there were parts of it that worked. There were parts of it that didn't, and I just thought the part 3 where it's like, and now we're going to have a sex scene or a post-sex scene with Miranda. I just thought, no, didn't need to do it. There's no reason she has to be in bed with someone in India, whatever. So yeah, no, but interesting, and yeah, not what I expected from an EDA.
Yeah, and not that I've been reading them, but I doubt in the Ncuti Gatwa new series adventure novels there's any characters wandering past bedrooms and sticking their head in and looking at people shagging. I don't think it's a thing in Doctor Who novels anymore.
No, it's not. It is definitely of its time. Rob, I want to talk then about another key part of the plot, and that is the concept of the last one.
Yeah.
I went into this not knowing, and early on you have the 2 hunters who are talking about the last one. We've got to find the last one. And in my mind I've gone, well, that's probably the Doctor. The Doctor's stuck on Earth.
Sure.
And then I thought, well, why would the Doctor be the last one? This is not the new series where he's the last of the Time Lords, so doesn't really fit the Doctor. And I thought, well, maybe there's some twist to why he's the last one. And I thought maybe the twist is that he's not the last one. Then they slowly introduce Miranda. And again, Miranda isn't brought in a way of like, ladies and gentlemen, Miranda. It's really just, here's a bunch of people in Deborah's class that we're meeting, one of whom's Miranda. And we're going to focus more on a couple of others in the class because they're more interesting straight away. They're more gregarious. They're more out there characters that we notice. And Miranda's a lot quieter. And then as we go through that interaction, Miranda's got a bit more going on under the surface. And then we seed in that she's got 2 hearts. Then we seed in that her body temperature is lower like the Doctor's is. And go from there. And then we slowly build up. And then we reveal that, yes, she is the last one. And that is who that they are after. And I just thought that was really well done across part 1, just slowly building up the concept of the last one, then the concept of Miranda, blending those 2, and then making the book about that was really well done. And I could imagine a movie doing it in that way too. It felt quite cinematic in the way that just the audience was allowed to slowly learn these things and piece them together and splice them together.
Yeah. And it plays into a bigger piece that is seeded through other EDAs and I think even some comics of the time that Lance Parkin and the other writers were working on, where essentially there was the war in heaven and 4 Time Lords survived it. One of them was the Doctor, the Infinity Doctor's Doctor, who is basically the McGann Doctor, but with the cropped hair. Do you remember when McGann was on the cover of Dwim and he had the shaved head?
Yes.
And he's promoting the TV movie?
Yeah.
That's who Lance Parkin takes as inspiration for the Infinity Doctor. And the Infinity Doctor is one of these 4 people, 4 Time Lords, who are now ruling the universe, and he becomes the Emperor, and Miranda is the daughter of that Emperor. So in a sense, Miranda is the Doctor's daughter, but a Doctor far, far removed from the 8th Doctor, way, 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 way in the future.
Right. So...
Does that colour some stuff in?
So, when I got the synopsis from you, Rob, that you wrote the first draft of, yes, and you started all this stuff about, and Miranda's a Time Lord, and the Doctor's, and I thought...
Oh, God, that would have been so confusing.
I thought, did we read the same book? Because yeah, okay. I can remember reading this and going, oh, she's got 2 hearts. Oh, I hope she's not a Time Lord. That would be a bit dull. and then thinking, oh, well, actually, no, there's no evidence that she's a Time Lord. Other species have two hearts. Oh, she's part of this whole Imperial family and this thing in the future and all the rest of it. Then I got your synopsis, and it's like, Miranda's a Time Lord, and this technology is the end of the Time Lords. And I thought, where did Rob pull that from? Did I miss something? I went on to TARDIS Wiki, I looked it up, and I'd gone, yeah, no, Miranda's a Time Lord. I thought, okay, did I miss something, or is Rob bringing other information to this? So you are. That's reassuring. So Rob, just explain that to me and the listeners.
Well, as I say, seeded across other novels.
Right.
And Miranda comes back in another EDA called Sometime Never. And if you want to know what Miranda's been up to ruling the universe and all of that sort of stuff, you can find out in that novel.
Right.
That's what people are terrified of, that these 4 Time Lords survive and become this imperial family and are ruling the universe. But millions of years into the future. So, I think Parkin and his pals have thrown it just so far forward. It does not interfere with Doctor Who in any way, shape or form in the present. And I think you're living proof here, Dave, that you can read this and not even know any of that and still find this book really enjoyable. And I think that's probably by design.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I didn't draw those connections at all, because I guess the connections were in another book. I thought it worked really, really well. I didn't need to know that they were Time Lords. I just thought they were this almost sort of Dune-style Imperial family.
Yeah.
So that worked really, really well. So my other question, Rob, since you're explaining things I don't know to me, when the Doctor first meets the Prefect, they talk about a previous encounter with him that he doesn't know. Is that because it's a previous encounter he can't remember due to his amnesia, or is it an adventure that he has in the future, or is it not explained?
I take that to be he's dealt with the Emperor, who, as I mentioned before, looks like McGann, but with a shaved head. So to him, they've met, but to the Doctor, they obviously haven't. The Doctor's just this guy who this hasn't happened to yet, and he has amnesia to boot. I mean, he's obviously still a genius. He's built a sonic suitcase in this story, for example, but he doesn't know, I think, how or why he knows how to do these things.
Yeah, and that takes me very neatly to the next point I wanted to make, which was the very interesting way in which we see the Doctor adapting to life on Earth. And Rob, you hinted about this when we did our hot take on Joy to the World. And I sort of reached to Spock and Kirk having to survive in 1930s New York in City on the Edge of Forever. You went to this as a different way to do the Doctor adapting without magic. And I thought this was a really wonderful and very well done example of how the Doctor has just established himself, and although he doesn't know who he is, he has certain latent skills. He certainly has his brain and his genius, and although he doesn't have the technology in 1980s Earth to create a sonic screwdriver, he instinctively knows how to use sonics and creates, as you say, the sonic suitcase, which is a really cool idea. I like the thing about him doing business restructuring, where he just goes in and says, this is how to make your business work a lot, and gets paid a lot of money for it. Not really buying into the whole, corporate world. He's sort of become a Thatcherite businessman, but without the Thatcherism, in that there are bits where, he talks about going in and the owner's like, so how many people do I need to cut? He's like, why do you do that? You can restructure them and make them even more efficient and have them happy at the same time. Oh, wow, it's even better. So it's this really sort of interesting vibe of the Doctor just sort of innocently going, oh, I can fix your business. Oh, and you'll pay me millions of dollars to do it. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, and the product that he makes the money off, one of the products is bottled water.
Yes.
So it's not weapons or anything. It's just water. And that ties into the 1980s when people did start bottling water. Prior to the 1980s, people would have thought you were insane for buying a bottle of water. But in the 80s, it became a thing. And that sort of ties into the Doctor's had this idea. He's made a lot of money from it.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see that he's indifferent to the money outside of what he needs to survive. So between part 1 and part 2, he moves from his little quiet farmhouse in a village somewhere, which is very Doctorish. It's very where you would expect to find the Doctor, to sort of this big, sort of walled, big, fancy city house. But he explains that the only reason he's bought that is because he knows there are threats to Miranda as the last one, and he wants to keep her safe. At the same time, he's not buying a BMW or a Mercedes. He's got his old, I can't remember what it was, but basically it's like a Lada from Berlin or something in the Cold War.
A Trabant.
A Trabant, that's it, thank you. And I just, so he's not suddenly become avaricious. He's not suddenly found a love of money, but he's just like, well, I need to keep my adopted daughter, the last one, safe because there are people with a blood feud who want to kill her. Therefore, I need to buy a big, very secure house. Okay, I buy that.
Exactly. Even with the Trabant, though, he has souped it up. I think there's a scene where he drives past someone on the motorway in a BMW or something, and he just cruises past them. So obviously, going back to the Bessie days, he's souping up vehicles, but he doesn't know how he can do this. He just does it. Yeah,
and then you finally get to part 3 in the late 80s, where Miranda has been kidnapped by Ferrin. She's on a UFO that, 3 days to recharge the engines conveniently, and he has to get to her. So in any other example, that would be, right, I'll get in the TARDIS and go find this UFO. In this situation where he's stuck on Earth, doesn't understand the TARDIS, and I think the TARDIS is still regenerating or something. Yeah, that was clear enough to me without really understanding it. And so this idea of, well, I need to steal a shuttle. And Parkin doesn't spend lots of time going into the real minutiae of the Doctor. I'm now going to inveigle myself here and steal these clothes and get there. We just sort of rock up with the plan in motion and say, oh, the Doctor inveigled himself there and stole those clothes and replaced those people, and now he's using the sonic suitcase to get in and hide in the shuttle. And you go, okay, that was actually done very, very efficiently, because we want to get to the Doctor on the UFO. The shuttle is a means to get there, but it was very clever.
Well, prior to that, we have him on Concorde working out how to steal the shuttle, and he's writing it on the backs of napkins that the stewardesses are giving him.
Yes.
And then he presents it to Deborah, and I think the first one is like, how to steal a space shuttle, he's written on it. And it's this childlike genius sort of thing that I really associate with the Eighth Doctor. Going back to the TV movie, like, I've got new boots, and he runs on the spot. That sort of joyous, again, childlike way of behaving comes across in that scene where he hands her all these napkins. Here's how we're going to steal a space shuttle. It's bonkers, but they do it.
Yeah, it's almost like he can steal the space shuttle because he doesn't know you're not allowed to steal a space shuttle, or that you can't steal a space shuttle. He's just like, yes, this is what I need to do, and I guess I'll just work out how to do it. And I agree. I did find that real sort of fun innocence of the Eighth Doctor was very, very well done. The part where Miranda's basically broken up with her boyfriend Bob and doesn't want to speak to him, and the Doctor's like, oh, you go to the same school, you must be friends. I'll get in the back of the car, I'll give you both a lift to school. That was very, very Doctorish, but also there was that darker part of the Eighth Doctor, that really intense McGann thing of, okay, you've done the wrong thing here now, and I need to stop you, which worked really, really well. I just thought, given I don't really know a lot about the Eighth Doctor, I thought that characterisation worked really well. Should we go into characters, Rob, or do you have other plot points to raise?
I've just got one more plot point before we get to characters, and that's, I prefaced this a bit earlier that I'd talk about it. My big hang-up with the novel is I think the ending is a bit rushed. All the way through, there's the plot point about Miranda as the daughter of the Emperor. She's the last one. She's this, she's that. She's very special. And near the end, in the time it takes you to turn from one page to the next, literally one chapter to the next, she's convinced an entire rebellion to follow her. Ferrin, who has wanted to kill her with all his heart and soul for literally decades of his life because of some time differences, is like, oh yeah, cool, let's play nice, let's build a new world. And it just feels a little rushed and disjointed there. I think as a TV episode it would work, because TV can take shortcuts like that. But in a novel where we followed this through line across an entire decade, literally, and things have built up slowly, for it to flip in the space of one chapter to the next is still, and it was this way the first time I read it, it's this way the second time I've read it, it's a bit, huh?
Yeah, I was actually going to bring a few of these points up as a character point when we discussed Ferrin, but no.
Well, let's move into characters.
Well, yeah, let's segue between the two, because I agree with what you're saying. I did find that part 3 was pretty good. The still in the shuttle was pretty cool, but there was that stuff at the end of like, well, we've just kind of got to resolve this all on the big spaceship, and it did feel like that last little bit where the revolution's been successful, they've cornered Ferrin in the flight deck, and then he just transmits off to sabotage the time engines because, hey, we need sort of one more exciting action beat before we can finish the book. I was sort of going, look, I get this, and if this was TV, yes, you would have to build to an exciting climax and have one little bit of an action beat to finish the story. I didn't think that it was needed here, but you're absolutely right. That moment of she sort of turns around, says, I'll deal with Ferren, has him on the ground. She goes to whisper something to him. The Doctor can see her whispering something in the corner. And when he walks over, it's like, yep, it's all sorted. He's cool now. And I was like, huh?
Yeah.
What are we going to find out what she said? You know, and we don't. And that was compounded by the fact that Ferren is an interesting character. We meet him in part 2 because the original prefect, the prefect being the leader of this alien species who has overthrown the Miranda's imperial family and are now trying to create social cohesion and avoid civil war without the imperial family. So the prefect, Zevron, is killed at the end of part 1 in quite a surprise. And then his younger brother inherits the prefecture, and he's the one that comes in part 2. And that idea of the much younger brother, the sort of the kid younger brother, suddenly finds himself inheriting the throne or the prefecture is an interesting one. Him having to sort of, work his way through teenage Earth society to try and kill Miranda, the last one, is interesting. I think that works really well, and he's convincing as a teenager suddenly thrust into all that. I think that's a really good part of the character. What is not convincing is the fact that he fails about 4 times in 4 chapters. It has very sort of like, Megatron, oh, well, I'll get you next time, Optimus Prime sort of vibes, because, oh, no, somebody interrupted him in the change rooms. Oh, whoops, no, they've taken the drink away before he could poison it. Yeah. Like, it was just sort of like he became quite inept quite quickly, which was a shame. But also that moment where he's seduced Miranda into her bedroom to get her alone to kill her, and then, he's enjoying making out with her so much that he's like, no, I'm in love with you now. And I'm like, what? Where did that come from? Now, had it been, and maybe this is kind of where Parkin was trying to go, that Ferren had realised that actually she was more used to his career as his consort than dead, because he could use her to unite the warring factions and almost bring back the Imperial family, but with him in charge. As I say, it sort of leans into that, but it's almost done, again, as this very sort of corny teenager, like, well, now that I've, spent half an hour in your bed, I'm in love with you. And it's like, yeah, if that was just a teenager, you'd go, yeah, fine, okay, you got to third base and you think this person's who you're going to marry. Okay, yeah, 18-year-old, fine, we get that. But this is the prefect of a large universal empire.
Yeah.
So it doesn't quite work.
It does lead into an obsession, though, because he makes the android Kate.
Yes.
Who is based on Miranda. And again, talking about sex, there's a scene where they're in the bath together, and she gets out of the bath and he's ogling her, and he is quite obsessed with Miranda and has been over decades, which has happened off screen because he got shot off into time and space and has had to sort of find his way back to Miranda with a time ship.
Yeah, I think all the ideas around Ferren work, and some of the execution works really, really well. I think some of the moving between those ideas doesn't work quite as well. But I will say the fact that Zevron is killed at the end of part 1, and he's sort of the big bad in part 1. Salak is killed at the end of part 2, but before Salak's killed, Ferren is sent off with that time bracelet thing. I thought, I wonder if he's gone now. And then Salak's killed as well, and I'm like, are they both killed? What's going to happen now? So it genuinely did leave me wondering.
Yeah, I think the novel's very clever with the antagonists, the way it's the Zevron and Salak show, then it's the Salak and Ferren show, and then Ferren comes back as a grown man in the third act, because it keeps the storytelling fresh. We can dispatch a baddie, and we can get a new one, and there's continuity between the baddies as well. So there's continuity all through the book, but we have these different takes and these different antagonists. It's quite clever. Yeah,
and Salak works very well as a counter to both Zevron and Ferren, as the classic television deputy who is just like more focused on the mission than the leader is. Yeah. And they've sort of got a bit of nuance about how does this work in my power structure, and now I fall in love with it because, I felt her up or whatever. Whereas Salak's just like, no, you said she's the last one. The Imperial family's got to be wiped out. We're wiping her out. Stop all your nonsense. Wipe her out. It's not a cliche is too strong a word, but it's a very conventional relationship, and he plays that really, really well, and he's quite an effective baddie.
Agreed. Now, Dave, you talked a lot about what you thought about the Eighth Doctor here, so I might move on to him. I think he is quite fascinating in this book because he's a man without his memories, but the personality of the Paul McGann Eighth Doctor is still there. So you're never reading this thinking, oh, piffle, that's not something the Doctor would do. That's so undoctorish. Yet, in some ways, it's not the Doctor. I think Parkin writes a really interesting character here who is both our hero and not our hero simultaneously. And we explore a kind of Doctor that's interesting, as he might do something unexpected because he doesn't have to be the Doctor in this at times.
It's really interesting to me that the Doctor has no mission here. He has no motivation. He's not the protagonist in this book. He's really not. He is somebody to whom events happen, and he deals with them as he needs to. So at the start of the book, he's just quietly living a life in an English village. He then has to adopt Miranda, and she becomes his daughter. And suddenly that's his mission, that's his motivation, and all he wants to do is make sure that he can provide for her and she can survive. At the end of the book, he actually doesn't really care about who Zephron is. He doesn't really care about stopping the alien plot. All he cares about is getting his daughter back and making sure she's safe.
Yeah.
It's not Doctorish at all. Even when the Doctor meets the aliens, he's just sort of like, okay, well, there's some aliens here. Well, that's fine. You're not wiping anyone out, so I don't care. Oh, you want to kill the child? Oh, well, I'm going to stop that because killing child's bad.
Yeah.
But it really is just like, if you're happy to not kill the child and bugger off, I'm cool with that. Like, I don't mind.
Yeah.
He only goes as far as he needs to protect Miranda. So it really isn't very Doctorish, because we're used to the Doctor being the protagonist. Plots happen because of what he wants to do. Here, he is totally reactive.
Yeah, exactly right. And that makes it very interesting. I love it.
The other character I really wanted to talk about was Deb. She's really interesting. I think she's first introduced in a bit of a twee way that sort of didn't quite work. And then suddenly I've thought, actually, no, I really like her and I want to learn more about her and I want to make sure she's okay. I like the way that she sort of slowly grows as a person to find her self-confidence, the way the Doctor helps her to do that. I like the fact that although she's friends with the Doctor, when the Doctor becomes focused on Miranda and moves away, she doesn't really keep in touch and then sort of has to become reacquainted. It's really good. She's a really good character. I cared about her. She works as a substitute companion for this. I mentioned earlier, Rob, that there was one death I didn't think worked at all. And for me, it was Deborah's. What did you think of it all?
It happens very quickly, and I assume that's to be quite shocking. And maybe because there is this suggestion that she'd stay in the Doctor's life now and live with him, and they might become quite a domesticated sort of couple. We can't have her in the mix because the Doctor's leaving the planet in the next story and getting his memories back. So she can't be anything else. I guess they could have done it that, she's so horrified by all this alien stuff that she doesn't want anything to do with the Doctor anymore or something. But I guess killing her was a more shocking thing to do, you know.
I think had this been done on television, the moment of reaching out for the switch, the close-up of the finger on the switch, the flash, the bang, and oh my God, she's dead, would work quite well. I sort of read it. I was reading this on the train to work at about 6 o'clock in the morning, and I sort of got further down the page to, the Doctor looked at Deborah's body, and I'm like, hang on.
Yeah.
Did that kill her? And I read back and reread the page, and I'm like, I think it has killed her. And then I was sort of like, is she unconscious still, or is she actually dead? And then I had a moment of, is the TARDIS village going to bring her back? And no, she really is dead. So I get what Parkin was trying to do with the, she's walking along, push a button, dead. I don't think it quite worked on the page.
Very fair. Briefly on Miranda, I think Miranda is a very cool character. Parkin's writing her to be like the Doctor. I was talking about this earlier. She's intellectual. She's not particularly interested in sex, outside of that intellectual desire to understand it, perhaps. She gets angry like a teenager. I think that's why she kills Salak when she doesn't have to. As I say, for people who like the cut of her jib, look up the EDA Sometime Never and see where she's at in the future. I say no more on that. I also do want to briefly talk about characters called Rum and the Lash, Dave, which I noticed you were calling T-Lash when we did the synopsis.
Yes.
And I'm calling the Lash because this is one of the rare moments where I rolled my eyes with this novel. It's the kind of thing that happens occasionally in the EDAs. There'll be a character or a chapter name and you think, yeah, so X band or X album or you're paying homage to something. And of course, this is a riff on the Winston Churchill quip. Do you know this one, Dave?
Oh, now that you've prompted it to me, it is surfacing from my mind somewhere, yes.
That the British Royal Navy tradition was all about rum, buggery, and the lash.
That's right, yeah.
And of course, Churchill denied he ever said it. He actually said he wished he'd said it. He thought it was a pretty good line, but he said he never said it. And of course, having said all of that, there is a Pogues album from the 80s called Rum, Sodomy, and the Lash, which I've got over on the shelf there on CD, which is also riffing on the Churchill quote. And given the 80s nature of this novel, that's more likely where this came from, now that I think about it.
Look, I didn't notice because in my mind I sort of went automatically to alien pronunciation.
Space name.
Yeah, I just read space name, so I'm like, T-Lash. That's a space name. Yeah, so I didn't even say the Lash. So I don't think at no point in my mind did I say the sentence Rum and the Lash. So it didn't even trigger. So there you go. I want to mention Barry, Deborah's husband, who doesn't quite work, but at least I think he only works in terms of helping to move Deb's plot along, which was fine. I think Bob was a really cool character. I liked the line about him being a kid in the 80s and just hating the fact that all his friends called him Bob, as in the Blackadder pronunciation. I thought that was quite clever. And indeed, there was a lovely line where the Doctor quotes Blackadder and somebody says, "Oh, is that a Blackadder quotation?" And he replies with another Blackadder quotation. I thought that was quite clever as well. What is it? No, this is different. It's spontaneous and it's called wit. I thought that was quite good. So yeah, look, some really good characters, and I did care about each of them when they died. I cared about Deborah when she died. I just didn't think the death was executed well.
Yeah, no pun intended. Should we move on to themes and the tone of the piece, Dave?
Look, I probably don't have anything that hasn't already come up. I think that the tones of sexuality are well meant but not well executed. I think the themes of family and the Doctor changing his life, where it goes from I'm just sort of living a quiet life to my life is now structured around protecting my family, is a very relatable one for a lot of people. I've seen friends who, it's all about how many nights a week can we get out on the piss, and suddenly it's all about how quickly can I get home to my kid. We've seen those changes in people's lives. I think that was worked really well. I think that the 80s works well as a theme here. I think the parts work well as a theme. There's some good sci-fi. I think although there's a few naff moments, it works, and I don't have anything to expand on I haven't already in that area.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. I'll just say I think the family aspect is something people might not expect, even in a novel that's called Father Time. This is very much the story of a father who cares for his daughter, as we've said, and has a woman come into his life who, if things were different, he probably would have lived with for the rest of her life. It's very domesticated. The Doctor owns houses, as we've said. He drives his daughter to school, as we've said. The police box is there, but it's still regrowing. It's just a prop in the corner of some scenes. It's a very atypical Doctor Who story. I think that's important for people to know before they read it.
No, that's a very fair comment. Rob, what was your standout scene?
Dave, I'm going to call out where the Doctor uses the transmutation machine to turn things into roses, because it's such a bonkers idea, this machine that can just create anything from anything. And when you think about what the Eighth Doctor would turn enemies into, flowers, of course, if not butterflies, then flowers. And just the visual of people becoming flowers, like some of the guards in the building, the flowers, they start turning into flowers. It's horrific, but it's also beautiful, and it feels very Eighth Doctor to me. And then the whole tower block turns into flowers. What an incredible thing to think about in your head as you're reading this. It really fires the imagination. I love that scene.
Yeah, and it's also a scene that I don't think you could do well on television, even with a Disney Plus budget in 2025. Yeah, you certainly couldn't have done it any earlier, and certainly not in the 80s on Doctor Who's budget.
No.
I am going to highlight the last part of part one. I thought part one was the strongest part of the book. Not to say the others were weak in any way, but I thought part one was the strongest part of the book. Lance Parkin has a gift for writing in a very visual way. Just War is one example. I think back to Just War, and I can remember scenes in Just War as though I watched them on television.
Wow.
It's really, really good at that. And one example that was really good was as we built up towards the end, you've got the fight happening, you've got the destruction of Mr. Gibson, but then that moment where Rum and T-Lash, or the Lash, as you say, where the two hunters decide, okay, well, we told him not to engage with the Doctor. We said this would end up badly, and now Zephron's been killed, Mr. Gibson's been destroyed, Sark's a prisoner. Let's just get out of here, and hey, before we do that, let's just blow the Doctor up to put a full stop on that. They push the button on the remote, then they say, hang on, he's not wearing his coat. Where's his coat? And the service droid says, oh, I took his coat off him. It's hanging up here. Do you want it? And that moment of just sort of looking at each other and then the nuke goes off and they blow themselves up. It was a really clever moment. It finished that part really well, but it's a moment where I could actually imagine it on television. I could imagine the timing of it. I was seeing the look between them. I could hear the incidental music and then see the explosion. It was a wonderfully visual moment, and it just wrapped up that part. That part one, the introduction of the village, the slow and gentle introduction of the last one of Miranda, the aliens, the flying saucers. I love a good flying saucer. You know that, Rob?
I do.
And then sort of the battle and the transformer. As a self-contained part, it was really, really exciting, and the end of it was really good.
Yeah, good stuff.
So look, I think the book holds up. I think that it's got a few little icky moments that we've discussed.
I want to discuss those more, actually.
Okay, well, I'll let you discuss those more, Rob.
Yeah, I do want to go back to the sex, because I think the depiction of sex is dated. And I actually made some notes on why I think a scene like the one with Dina having sex with Bob really feels strange in 2025, but didn't feel strange a quarter of a century ago. First, I think a quarter of a century ago, novels were much more relaxed about depicting teenage characters in sexual situations. There was little discussion about the way teenage sexuality was framed for young adult or even adult readers. And today there's just more awareness, I think, of how these depictions can be problematic, even if they're not intended to be that way.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. This isn't that long after the Tomorrow When the World Began saga came out in book form out here. And I can remember sort of a lot of excitement because, have you heard the Hearst book has a masturbation scene? And, this is very new. And I remember reading that as about a 14, 15-year-old just going, this is terrible. Like the author seems to, look, I'm really edgy. I've got a masturbation scene with a teenager. I'm just going, this is just so artificial and not real that it just feels like it's been dropped in for the sake of having it. Yeah.
Oh, and in one of the follow-up series that comes after Tomorrow When the World Began, I think where Ellie is grown up, she has this dream about her parents naked and goes into quite some graphic detail about their naked bodies. It's very strange. Anyway, I won't go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, I just raise it because like the sex stuff in that is contemporaneous and feels the same. It's kind of like, look, we're doing teenage sex, but not very well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The second of the three things I've noted is I think modern audiences are more likely to scrutinise whether a sexual relationship is equal. Even between two teenagers, is there a power imbalance? Is there coercion? These weren't things we thought about in 2000, but in 2025, they're at the forefront of discussions. And in the Dina and Bob case, my gut feeling is Dina's holding all the cards and has the power over Bob, but that's just never even hinted as an issue. We just see them having sex. She's on top of him. Away she goes. And finally, back in 2000, let's face it, Doctor Who was super niche. It had a small and pretty adult-skewing audience, so the novels did stuff that just went unnoticed. But in 2025, Doctor Who's a global franchise again. It's got a far more scrutinised brand image, and a scene that once felt like an edgy moment in an obscure novel now feels just wildly out of place being tied to such a mainstream, family-friendly series. I think ultimately the scene hasn't changed, we have changed.
Yeah, I think that's right. I doubt it would have been actually that great at the time, but it's certainly a lot worse now, yeah.
Yeah, that's all I've got to say.
So, Rob, you're the one who recommended this, so clearly you would recommend this book to others?
Yeah, I actually would recommend this. Not as my first Doctor Who book for someone, but for someone with a bit of a feel for the show and the Eighth Doctor, I'd say to them, hey, here's what you need to know. The Doctor's stuck on Earth. He can't use the TARDIS because he doesn't really know who he is or what he is, but he keeps powering forward and having adventures, and in this one he adopts a daughter. Stuff happens. Enjoy. You don't need to have even read the previous books in the Earth arc, and I think that might be how you came across it, Dave, that you didn't feel you were missing, much by not having read those.
No, I think that's a very correct summary, Rob. I really enjoyed this book. It is a proper page-turner. The characters are great. Parkin is a fantastic Doctor Who writer. He gets the show. He gets the Eighth Doctor in a way that I was really impressed by. So I really enjoyed the book. Not perfect, a few faults, but a really, really interesting book. I do agree, though, that if you went in completely cold, this would actually be maybe even a bit off-putting. I was fortunate that I went in with just enough background that, there is this thing where the Doctor has amnesia and he spends time on Earth and all the rest of it. So I was able to get that. So I would say to the listeners, I think that what we've discussed across the course of this podcast will give you more than enough background to now dive into it without having to read the earlier books.
Yeah.
But it has left me intrigued enough to maybe seek out the rest of the Earth arc and have a look at them, because I do want to know, and I regretted that I got to the end of this and didn't know why the Doctor had amnesia and how he was going to get his memory back. I was sort of hoping this would be the last in the arc and I'd find all that out, which, was cheating. Mm-hmm. But, it would have been unfortunate if the one book I read was the one that solved it. No real effort there.
Well, you've got a few places to go. You could read Escape Velocity next and find out what happens. How does he get his memories back? How does he meet Fitz again? You could go back to the start of the arc, or you could go ahead and read Sometime Never and have Miranda come back and do something with an Eighth Doctor very much in control of his faculties.
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, it has left me intrigued. It has left me thinking I do need to dive back into the EDAs. And look, I've enjoyed rereading the Virgin New Adventures, one here and there over the last decade, really. Maybe I need to make a point of reading some of the EDAs that I haven't read. That does, of course, involve finding copies that are not prohibitively expensive. And you say, what am I going to read next? The answer to that will probably be decided by economics.
Yeah, fair. I might have to post you some of mine, Dave. You can read mine.
No, that's good. But no, a good recommendation. I enjoyed the book.
Excellent. Me too.
We'll now move on to listener feedback. And we've done a lot over the last couple of months, Rob. So we have a lot of feedback, but we will get through it. I will kick us off with an email from Peter Deadman. Mm-hmm. He says, "Hi, Rob and Dave. I've just listened to your hot take episode. For the first time, however, I've not watched the episode to go with it. For the first time since Let's Kill Hitler, I'm just not bothering to watch, and I'm observing from afar. I will likely watch next time I have Disney+, but given the cost of that is increasing and the quality is dropping, I'll likely just get it for a month and watch Andor Series 2 as well. To be honest, I didn't even know Doctor Who was on until I saw your hot take episode. I'm just a bit meh at this stage, and hopefully later episodes will improve and I'll be pleasantly surprised. Anyway, a bit of a downer, but I'll keep listening to your reviews, and if you give a 9 or a 10 out of 10 episode, it'll prompt me to seek it out. Cheers, Peter. Peter, I know that more and more with so many streaming services, people are doing that. They're waiting till all of Doctor Who and all of Andor and all of something else are finished and say, right, I'll get a month, I'll binge watch those 3, and then I'll unsubscribe.
Yeah, exactly. And dear listeners, that's the only hot take email we're going to read on this episode. We've been saving up all the others. We have loads and loads and loads, and we'll get to what we can of them in our wrap show when we do the wrap show of the whole season.
Our next one, Rob.
Yeah, this is Chris Brown via email. He says, "Hi, long-time listener here. I've just heard the episode with Rob and Mike and wanted to share a related anecdote. As a college student in New England during the late 90s, my favourite non-sci-fi TV drama was Homicide: Life on the Street, a show Mike mentioned in relation to the David Simon book Homicide: A Year on the Killing Streets. In my dormitory, I made close friends with 2 students from Baltimore, so of course I would ask them questions about the city, shooting locations, and how Homicide: Life on the Street was being received back home. In those early days of DVD, before internet file sharing was a thing, we'd all watch shows on the lounge TV, and being a fan of Doctor Who and some other British productions, I would import new disc releases directly from the UK. While I was familiar with some, like The Five Doctors, most were blind purchases based on their sales ranking, The Ali G Show, Cold Feet, RTD's Queer as Folk, and so on. This last title in particular proved very popular among my dorm mates, and one of those friends from Baltimore, whose stepfather was a newspaper writer, became such a fan that I dubbed her some copies. Fast forward a few years, post-graduation, and she texts me out of the blue to say, "You won't believe this, but I'm playing pool with Stuart from Queer as Folk. He's here in Baltimore for the show my stepfather is writing on." It was at that moment I belatedly realised that her writer stepfather was no other than David Simon himself. To this day, I don't know if Aidan Gillen got considered for his role on The Wire because of those DVD copies, although I have wondered about the butterfly effect. While the rest of us were into Who, Farscape and DS9, my other Baltimore friend was a vocal proponent of Babylon 5. He even tried to loan me his off-the-air tape collection, but I refused to give it a chance after my negative impression of the pilot film in 1993. It took Dave, ranking B5 among his favourites, to push me to finally pick up the Blu-ray and experience it for myself. Finishing up the 3rd season just now strikes me as an early effort at the type of deeply interconnected sci-fi breadcrumb laying that Netflix's German language series Dark accomplished to perfection over its 3-season run. I recommend it for alternate galaxies, as I think it likely you will both find this criminally overlooked show rather amazing. Without spoiling, but at risk of overselling, the series reveals itself as the most meticulous, even superhuman, dramatic construction I have experienced in any medium, incredibly, without a single wasted scene across its 26 hours. Once the table is set, every episode onward delivers payout upon payout as they simultaneously set up for future reveals. It's Stranger Things broadcast from another galaxy. I absolutely love Rob's song coders on several of the Gin and TARDIS episodes, and I had never laughed so hard at a podcast until I heard about Dave's close encounter with Tamura Morrison in musical form. I must know, how long does it take you to crank those out? I love the show. Thanks for all the entertainment you provide. I could listen to you guys discuss anything for hours.
Wow, thank you, Chris. Rob, how long does it take?
The hardest part is writing the lyric. Coming up with a lyric that makes sense. And I must say, I made a song for the last Gin and TARDIS, the Awakening and King's Demons episode, and I didn't think it was up to scratch, so I didn't put it on the end. But given how much Chris likes these songs, maybe I'll stick it on the end of this episode. How about that?
Well, we'll get to judge them if you do. And yeah, look, really interesting to hear all that from you, Chris. I remember watching Queer as Folk. It's interesting that Aidan Gillen is sort of the one actor from that who I think really went on to a very successful career in Hollywood. And yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Stranger Things as well in the context of B5. I remember when I saw the end of the last series of Stranger Things, having come to it late, I said to some friends, this is the best payoff of breadcrumbing that I've seen since Babylon 5. So totally get it.
That's wild. And that German series Dark, Chris, I have seen it. I really liked it.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
I think you'd like it too, Dave. There is some time stuff going on in it.
Good chance to practice my German too.
Yes.
Tristan Quick emails us to say, hello Rob and Dave, I have it in the back of my head that you may have done something similar before, but my idea for the list makers is spiritual two-parters, 2 episodes that deserve to be watched back to back due to similar theme, emotion, monsters, etc., but aren't officially two-parters. For example, a lot of people said that Wild Blue Yonder was a spiritual successor to Midnight, which is where I got the idea from. Currently messaging you on a train from Leeds to London, listening to the best of Doctor Who soundtrack. I'm a huge fan of you guys and look forward to seeing what you think of the new series. Keep up the good work and take care. Best regards, Tristan Quick, an avid listener.
It's a lovely email. I'll continue on with Dan Hayward via email. He says, hey guys, hope you're well. It's been about 2 years since I last emailed and I remain eagerly tuning in for my listmaker's idea to be pulled out of Turlough's ever-growing hat of Rassilon. Isn't that the truth? But don't worry, even after it's pulled out, I'll still tune in for every episode. I know you guys get so many people messaging you, but I just wanted to express my love for your podcast. I listen while walking to work, in the gym, in the shower, and before going to sleep. Creepy when I say it like that. My idea for a topic for the main monthly episode is to cover the 2 Peter Cushing movies. I recently went to CEX and found Blu-ray versions of the 2022 digitally enhanced films and snapped them up in a heartbeat. As a fan born in 2001, I was captured by the new series and slowly worked my way backwards and forwards from Chris Eccleston. I was always aware of these Cushing movies because my mum would talk about them. I think they're such a niche part of Doctor Who lore, definitely towards the bottom of a Doctor Who iceberg. Sorry for my rambly email. It's me trying to prolong my weekend for as long as possible before sleeping and waking up on a Monday. Take care, you guys. All the best from Dan.
Thank you very much, Dan. I saw both those movies in the cinema about 18 months, 2 years ago. And yeah, look, we'll put that in the mix as a possible topic one day.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
We should also put the telly movie in the mix sometime, Rob, given we've just talked about the 8th Doctor so much.
That would be fun too.
Troy emails us and says, hi Rob and Dave, I've been listening to your show for about 6 months now, and in that time I've also listened to many episodes in your back catalogue, so effectively I've been listening to the show for years. I enjoy your discussions about all aspects of the show and generally agree with most things that you say. Even when your opinions differ from mine on certain topics, your professional way of articulating the point enables me to see things from a different angle. Thank you, Troy.
Yeah.
What prompted me to email, though, was to discuss a topic where we are polar opposites, the 6th Doctor's era. I think Colin Baker's 2 seasons, plus Peter Davison's 3 seasons, are the best in the show's history. But rather than discuss Colin's era as a whole, I thought I would focus on one particular story that you have both said you don't enjoy, Mind Warp. I've heard Dave say a number of times he actually feels quite uncomfortable watching this story, particularly the part where Perry says she's scared and wants to leave, and the Doctor just completely dismisses her. Mind Warp looks fantastic, the music is amazing, the guest cast is 10 out of 10, and the drama and tension is off the charts, especially the final episode. All in all, classic Doctor Who. But what sets this story apart from any other in the show's history is we are seeing it via the Matrix as evidence in the Doctor's trial, and most importantly, the evidence has been tampered with by the Valeyard in order to make the Doctor appear guilty. What we are seeing is not an accurate depiction of what happened on Thoris Beta. It's actually a unique Doctor Who story because of that, almost like an alternate reality. If it makes you feel uncomfortable, then the story and the Valeyard has done its job. Of course, at the end of the trial, we find out that Perry wasn't killed, and the above-mentioned scene didn't happen either. So all's well that ends well, if you ask me. I know I'm not telling you guys anything you didn't know already, but I would be interested to hear you discuss the story further, but looking at it from an alternate reality viewpoint. Keep up the good work. Definitely the #1 Doctor Who podcast in the world. Regards, Troy of Caringbah. Rob.
That's high praise.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm feeling quite good after that email.
Yeah, look, I agree with all the positive Troy raises in that. I totally understand the perspective he's coming from. Mm-hmm. Does it mean I can get past the stuff I don't like? Rationally? In theory? Yeah. Emotionally? No. And that's what I was saying earlier about hot takes. You know, Doctor Who is an emotional experience, and sometimes it just gels for one person away, it doesn't for another.
Yeah, fair enough. We're getting into some quickfire stuff here, Dave. I've got Oscar Groucho via X. Here's a list makers or two for you. Top 5 EDA, NDA covers from an art perspective. And my personal favourite, the top 5 New Who stories you would like to have seen adapted in the Leakley Bible.
That's a really interesting idea, Oscar, and we may do something a bit different with that in the coming months.
Mm-hmm. Say no more.
I'm going to read now some quick comments we had on our Gin TARDIS episode on The Awakening and the King's Demons. Ryan McGiven via X says, I rewatched The Awakening the other day after a long while. It feels a very odd story for some reason, yet I really like it. Glenn Hewitt on Facebook says, having a blast with your double feature. I always enjoy your Gin TARDIS episodes. As a side note, I've just discovered Blake 7 for the first time, and I'm currently working my way through the series, so I'm keen to listen to Spacefall. All the best and take care. Scott Michael via Facebook. Great episode, though I'm sad that there was no song at the end like the others.
Yay! I am going to put it at the end of this one now.
I think you're obliged to, Rob. The Awakening is definitely the better story. I've always thought it would have fit better for the McCoy era or even the NAs. It's just that vibe. Interesting thought there. Peter Field on Facebook. Great selection of stories to vote for. I've got to admit, I was waiting and hoping the gents would suggest Warrior's Gate. Plenty of fodder in eSpace. Enjoying this spin-off podcast immensely. And Mark Trotman via Facebook. How come you didn't call this series Gin and Sonic? There's a missed opportunity, Mark. Oh.
Yeah, you'll have to feed that back to the other guys.
Yes, oh well.
I've got some comments here on Don't Read the Comments, which is the little spin-off podcast I've been experimenting with of late. Ian McArdle via Facebook says, I hope you'll be reading these comments. I think it's good, fun for a short podcast, especially as an instant reaction to a piece of big news. I'd love to hear some more, perhaps with comments from some more fanish sources or maybe Radio Times. It would be interesting to have a co-host and use the comments to spark a discussion, especially in the speculation phase before a series hits. Shane Gordon via Facebook says, I enjoyed this and think it has legs. Unlike Ian McArdle, I do think it works fine as a lone voice. Not sure having a co-host would help. I think another voice might just lead into debate and speculation, and that for me is better for news and short topics in the monthly show. Sharing each podcast would be good, so instead of just hearing Rob all the time and your reactions, one could be Dave or various other friends of the show you have. I like it, and I'll have to add some comments for you to read. Oh, and another comment, slightly less music, though I do like the jingle. Glenn Hewitt via Facebook says, listening to this now, he is hoping you can expand it to a full series of podcasts. There is definitely some fire-breathing potential here. Richard Hardman via Facebook. This is great fun. Lol. SMA via YouTube. Gee willikers, I've been absolutely shattered since Primary Sources ended. Can't wait for another mini podcast. Salamander60 on Blue Sky says, great idea in principle, but in my honest opinion, would work better as a multi-hosted show. Also, it would be better if you stick with comments that are relevant to the topic. Great show, and thanks again. And finally, Peter Deadman via email, listened to Don't Read the Comments, and I wanted to give some feedback. I definitely think short and informal discussion of news or events as they come up is a good way to keep us informed. I'd have not known the episode titles had been revealed for the new season without this, for instance, since I avoid most social media. I do question that many people who are commenting on Twitter, YouTube, etc. are throwing up opinions to get a reaction, and finding out they're getting attention might just feed the trolls. So, I like the concept of a brief Who Watch sequence when big stuff comes up, but not sold on reading comments. I am biased against a lot of social media users, though. Cheers from Peter.
Some good thoughts there, Robin. We'll take that and evolve the concept as we go.
We will indeed.
Some feedback on our Listmakers episode, Guest Characters We Date, which we got a lot of really positive feedback from, Rob. I thought that was fun.
Yeah, it was.
Simon Threadgold says, Vishinin from Curse of Fenric. We could talk about Russian literature, and later there's something else I'd like to check off my list with him. Okay, I see what you did there, Simon.
I think Simon's been watching old reruns of Are You Being Served with that sort of line.
David Blanchard. I'd pick Vira and find out about her life before and after the arc in space. Nick H. Really funny episode, gents, and you danced around the subject really well, as one does not want to objectify anyone, but can also appreciate it when someone is attractive. Oscar Groucho, that was a terrific episode, adroitly handled. A potential minefield navigated far easier than young Davros. Neil Pickering, brilliant episode, a mad idea executed perfectly, loved it. Ian Key, definitely Charlotte Ritchie, possessed or not.
Yay.
Martin Oates, I think you both did rather well to stay on the right side of this line. Some excellent and interesting choices from you both. Could see the logic. Looking forward to episode number 50. And finally, Andrew Wilson via YouTube. So one I wouldn't have thought of until yesterday. I went to a convention in London and one of the panels was Gemma Redgrave. Kate would already have been there. But also on it were Steph DeWally and Susan Twist. I was blown away by Susan. Really funny, warm and charming. So Susan it is then. But there is a problem. Which character? I think a portrait may be too quiet. An ambulance? Not really. Penny Pepper Bean? Don't like her daughter. So Susan Triad then. Just as long as she keeps her dog at home.
Very good. Now we've got comments on our Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy episode. We said we did a lot this past month, Dave. We weren't lying. Frankie Norton via Facebook says, hi guys, just listened to this today, a little bit late, but for good reason. I had never seen Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy before, but had thought of it from time to time. So inspired by you and Dave and this episode of the pod, I decided to buy the Blu-ray and watch it for the first time before listening to the ep. I don't know if it's quite my kind of thing, but I did quite enjoy it. Definitely not sorry I took a chance on it. My favourite character was definitely Ford Prefect. I very much enjoyed David Dixon's portrayal of the character. Having watched it first, I then very much enjoyed the Alternate Galaxies podcast, being able to have some idea of what you were talking about, lol. Thanks again to you both for this excellent podcast. Stephen Moffat says, great episode. I fell in love with Hitchhiker's Guide when the TV show aired in '83. Read the books and discovered the sublime radio shows afterwards. I've listened to the Dirk Mag's successor radio shows and audiobooks so many times since. Thanks, lads. And Edge of Destruction says, thanks, great listen, as always. Always assumed I saw it first, but can date reading it to 1980, so clearly that wasn't the case. Always loved the books and the TV show, but am more likely to return to the books as there is just more there. Interstate discussion with my 19-year-old son, a small sample size, but he reports that a number of his friends have read it, but reckons most of them wouldn't be familiar with the TV series. Perhaps the novels will be the most enduring format.
I think that's probably correct, yes.
Yeah, I think so too.
A comment on the War Games. Hi Rob and Dave, hope you guys are well. I want to tell you about my experience watching the War Games in colour. Watching Doctor Who I haven't seen before is always very exciting, so I was excited to watch this new version. I find it intriguing that the BBC are doing this at all, colorising some of the black and white stories. I've had many discussions with fellow fans about it, and whether it's a good thing or not overall. So, I watched it and boy does it move along. It was quite impressive. I enjoyed the colours used for the army uniforms. They seemed pretty good. The Central War Zone was interesting. I can see why some people think the War Chief is, well, the Doctor's nemesis. I don't think every evil Time Lord has to be that character. I found the added part of the regeneration interesting. Overall, I really enjoyed it and think I might watch it and the original again sometime, perhaps close together. Also, it has been 20 years this month since New Doctor Who started on TV. Wow, I feel old. Hope you have a great rest of your week. Much love, Sammy Satine.
Yeah, we didn't really touch on 20 years of New Who. It kind of went by.
Yeah, it kind of did. I mean, we don't really sort of do anniversaries that much, apart from the really big ones. But
yeah,
I think the fact that the new series is starting has perhaps taken a lot of the focus.
Yeah, that's true. And finally, on our Lord of the Rings show, John Isles via Blue Sky says, just caught up with your Alternate Galaxies app where Dave watched Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring for the first time. I prefer sci-fi to fantasy, but those films are amazing and I have watched them multiple times. I'm looking forward to hearing what he made of the other films.
Well, hopefully they're out there and hopefully you're enjoying our takes.
Yeah, it was a fun series to do.
Rob, we've talked a lot, so just a quick what have we been watching? The answer for me is not a lot, but two series I have managed to get through because they've been relatively small. The second season of Wolf Hall dropped 10 years after season 1 dropped. Now, I only discovered season 1 about 3 years ago, so it wasn't the full 10-year gap for me. I just think this is an excellent series. It is set during the reign of Henry VIII. It takes you through Catherine of Aragon and Anne Boleyn and Jane Seymour, and then ends when Henry marries Anne of Cleves. Spoilers for 500-year-old plot. Look, it's a fantastic cast. They were able to get almost all of the cast from Series 1 back, the big exception being Tom Holland, who is probably doing some even bigger stuff now, but the fact they got Tom Sangster back was really good to see. Just fantastic. If you're interested into history, it was done so well, so I love that. I've also watched the big Netflix drop of the last month, Adolescence. Now, I saw this sort of drop and thought that looks interesting and didn't get around to it for a couple of weeks, and in that time I saw a lot of media, particularly on my UK social feeds, about this thing, and it started off with like, wow, the new Netflix series Adolescence is really impressive, and every episode's one take, this is really impressive, and we really like it. And then sort of lots of op-eds coming in, like, this is all about this thing, and it's good, or it's about this thing, and it's not good. And funnily enough, every op-ed writer's view seemed to match their ongoing view of other issues, and, the show reinforces my views on this topic. Like, what a shock. I watched it, and I didn't take away anything particularly political or social about it much at all. I just thought it was a fantastic piece of drama. That first episode particularly, where the kid is arrested and they go through the police station, because it is all done as one take, and so it's all in real time. You actually, like, you play through like being checked in at the police station and the lawyer being involved. Like, it's all done in real time, and so it feels incredibly real. The acting is superb, especially from the kid. Everybody said it, that's not a new take. So, yeah, Adolescence, look, I have no idea about what it's saying about greater stuff, because I don't really follow a lot of that online stuff. I just thought it was really good drama.
Yeah, I've came across people talking about Adolescence with regard to the first Doctor Who episode this season, The Robot Revolution, with regard to incels and such, saying that, a show like Adolescence does this topic so much better, why is Doctor Who even bothering? But I have no reference point for it because I've never seen Adolescence, so I can't comment.
Yeah, and look, I think people are extrapolating a bit from Adolescence on that. Like, it's talked about, but a lot of things are talked about. Look, viewers will make up their own opinion. It's art. That's what it's for.
For me, Dave, a very basic list this month. I haven't been watching any strange Japanese TV dramas this time, although there is one dropping about a TV news show that I might dive into soon. I can't think of its name offhand, but that looked interesting. It's just been Doctor Who, now that it's been back for a few weeks. I've had a very slow burn through some Grange Hill seasons. I've gone from season 3 into season 4 now. And of course, Andor is back on as I speak, and dare I say we'll do an Alternate Galaxies on that sometime later in the year to join the season 1 Andor show we did a while back, and of course before that a review of Rogue One that we did even earlier. So other than that, very little here either, Dave.
Yes, no, I'm very much looking forward to getting stuck into Andor.
Yes.
Well, we have spoken about a lot, but next time, Rob, we have decided, given we are spending a lot of time doing hot takes over the next couple of months, Our May monthly show will be very, very classic Doctor Who focused and also very easy for us to do because we will be busy. And we want our listeners who aren't all that interested in the new series to get some classic content to keep them going. So we're going to do a deep dive into a single story. We agreed that we would nominate 4 what we've called forgotten stories to talk about and let our listeners pick them. So forgotten stories is a very open sort of concept, Rob.
Yep.
What have you gone for? What are your nominations?
It was actually a very hard thing to come up with, Dave. I pulled up a list of stories and mulled over it for a long time. But I'm going with Castrovalva.
Ooh.
Because I think it gets glossed over a lot as, oh yeah, hey, that's Davo's debut. Let's move on. I think it deserves a bit more. And, I don't know how you're going to take this, on the back of the email from Troy from Caringbar, let's go there, Dave. Not to Caringbar, but let's do Trial of a Time Lord episodes 5 to 8, aka Mind Warp.
Interesting. Okay, interesting. I have also picked a Colin Baker story to nominate.
Oh, really?
I've also picked a part of the trial.
No.
I have picked Trial of a Time Lord 1 to 4, Mysterious Planet, which I think is the one that is forgotten about, given the more controversial and more behind-the-scenes controversy from the other ones. So there'll be 2 segments of trial in our ballot.
That's outrageous.
Wow.
This is not planned there.
No, that is not. That is not. I wonder if one will win or they'll split the vote. Interesting. My other nomination, I have gone for The Ambassadors of Death, which I think is that early Pertwee story that is sort of glossed over because it's not Spearhead, it's not Inferno, and hasn't got Autons. It's sort of the one that I think is forgotten a bit in that early time. It is longer, but we have a month. So, Castrovalva, Mind Warp, Mysterious Planet, Ambassadors of Death. Listeners, vote for the one you think will be the most interesting conversation, not necessarily the best story.
I'm looking forward to this one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. But that's it. I hope you've all had a wonderful Easter break. I hope you're enjoying the new series. Join us for our hot takes. We've got our list makers coming out shortly, which is our top 5 Doctors, our 50th episode, Rob.
Yes.
And then once the election's over on May 3, we'll be watching The Neverending Story and doing a alternate galaxies on that. Plenty coming up from the Doctor Who show. But until then, I've been Dave.
And I've been Rob.
And we will speak again soon.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
You've been listening to
The Doctor Who Show with Rob and Dave.
Find us online by searching for
The Doctor Who Show.
We also love it when you write in. Drop us a line anytime at hello@thedwshow.net.
Castle halls where shadows play. Devil lands to save the day. By traveling over time on his side. Through history's storm, he turns the tide. He moves with wisdom, he stands with grace. A hero time cannot erase. Devo, strong and wise. A time lord with fire in his eyes. With sword or reason, he finds the way. A hero the stars won't forget today. The village shakes, the ground is torn. The malice wakes, its rage is sworn. No blade can fight what he must face. So Devo turns to mind and grace. He moves with wisdom, he stands with grace. A hero time cannot erase. Devo, strong and wise. A time lord with fire in his eyes. With sword or reason, he finds the way. A hero the stars won't forget today. The village shakes, the ground is torn. The malice wakes, its rage is sworn. No blade can fight what he must face. So Devo turns to mind and grace. He moves with wisdom, he stands with grace, a hero time cannot erase. Dave, oh Dave, oh, strong and wise, a time lord with fire in his eyes. With sword or reason, he finds the way, a hero the stars won't forget today. Steel for the battle, knowledge for peace, his fight for justice will never cease. Two worlds, two trials, one guiding light. Dave will always stand for the right. Dave, oh Dave, oh, legend untold, a traveler fearless, brave and bold. Through time and turmoil, through fire and rain, the hero returns again and again.